Morning, United Kingdom. Morning to the drive time session with Lakhi Singh, the property fixer. And we've got Lakhi Singh on this morning to continue the drive time. This morning, we've got the continuation of negative equity as being a topic for discussion. And the saying of the week being that the art or this getting started. We had Harry William on yesterday, both brothers, and obviously they were talking to us about how they'd already got their feet under the desk with providing solutions for investors. So, talking of being ahead, Lucky Thing also mentioned yesterday I think at the age of about 19, he was given the buy-to-let keys to their first property that he and his brother had basically gone out, gotten ready, prepared, painted, and let out. So this basically is the secret. Those people who want to get ahead are the ones that start, and Lucky Singh was one of those back in the days at the age of 19, before television was invented, before cars were around. Lucky Singh had already taken on the responsibility of his family's first buy to let. Morning, Lucky Singh, the property fixer. How are you doing this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you guys doing?
Excellent, excellent. Right. So, in line with our topic of the week, and we've had lots of interesting discussions in the past 2 3 weeks, with lots of people giving their input as to what they think the market is, what valuations are, what is, um, the Chartered Institute of Surveyors, and all these gimmicky words and complicated formulas. But ultimately, one of the questions that's left unanswered that we posed to Ninda on Friday last. And good news is, apparently, he's going to be joining us again this Friday. So we're going to be very blessed to have Ninda in on Friday again to continue the topic. And the question that I feel was unanswered or left unanswered was, what happens when the interest rates go up? Because all the wonderful formulas and all the inward investment and all the HS2s, they can't fix negative equity, and they can't fix the implications of interest rate hikes, especially when the assets already are negatively geared or at least break even. So it seems as if there is a delayed uh, position in terms of a big crash that's around the corner. Because all I can understand is if a property hasn't got any equity left in it, it's already negatively geared or at least highly geared. Interest rates go up, it's going to deflate the property market more and deflate property prices, which I assume means more negative equity, and a bit like the song "More Money, More Problems." This is a bit like more delay, bigger problems. So, what do you have to say that, Lucky Singh? What's your input on that? Do you feel that delaying action in this present environment is going to leave people with a bigger deficit if they don't take action?
Well, let me answer the question a slightly different way, which is that everything comes back down to human psychology and the type of thinking or that's ingrained in a lot of people that possibly are not like really astute business people, or they're just getting into property or are accidental landlords. The psychology normally is that they may be too optimistic or may not be looking at the risks in a comprehensive way because they're blotting out the risks in their head. The risks are there in front of them. Me and you might be able to see them because we do this every day. But that they will ignore the risks, and they'll want to bury their head in the sand, is the syndrome that's actually out there. So question is not about what's happening in the market, negative equity. The question is, how do we help people who basically don't want to come face to face with the reality of what's happening? So that's the bigger question I think we should be posing to people. And when I meet people, they usually are in a fight and flight mode. They don't really having been through something similar myself, you basically just want to run away from the problem, and you don't really want to be countering it, and you want it to just go away. So it's a sort of semi fight and flight, somewhat depression, anxiety, and somewhat ostrich in the sand type syndrome. I think those three things are quite prominent in the psychology of these type of people.
Okay, question. You use a very important keyword there, help. You want to help people. Okay, that's, I think, key to understanding what the alternative business and property solutions community is about. It's about helping people to get together, finding solutions. We had lots of different interesting debates about how to find a solution in a difficult market by being creative. I suggested playing football with high heels on and swinging from the goal stick. Probably didn't make sense, but that's creative in my world. So we have a big shout out from Bob Singh. He's the only one who uses the Lakhi Singh fixer sign, and Sajal Patel as well. And we've got a new person, I think, a gentleman by the name of Paul Collier, who says it's an interesting conversation and he's given us a thumbs up. So thumbs up, Lakhi Singh, to the conversation. Right. So this goes back to that interesting debate we had, or conversation we had about 2 weeks ago. Is that an illusion? Because ultimately, one party says you've got to really deal with your creditors. You've got to pick up the phone. You've got to talk to them. I think the guest we had, I can't remember the gentleman's name. Like saying, you put me wiser. The gentleman who deals with credit and debt solutions. What was his name?
Mike Segal.
Mike Segal, that's right, the elder brother of Steven. He said it's about taking head on the problem, so talking to the creditors. But how can you talk to a creditor when you know you've only got 100,000 in the bank, your debts are 200,000? The mathematics don't make sense. You know that if you talk to any creditor, they're going to say, pay me my money. You pay all the money to one creditor, then you've got a deficiency for the rest of them. So what is the art of taking your head out of the sand? Because you said you want to help people take their head out of the sand, or allow them the discretion to start thinking about their problems. I think I'm going to ask you an important question. I've got this from quite a few of the large investors I've spoken to, and they say, well, surely they can't pull him down, and they're pointing to the 100 millionaire and saying, well, they can't pull him down. If he goes, well, I go. Well, so everyone goes. So I think there's an environment out there where people seem to feel that they are too big to fail, but they don't seem to realize they're not a bank. They are quite small in the grander scheme. Or is that not the case? Are they too big to fail? Is 100 million portfolio? I remember, I think at one time you were probably 70 million plus, were you?
Not quite that much. Somewhere a little bit lower,
okay.
but
okay,
quite
70
big.
million. Let's suppose the figure was between, say, 50 million and 70 million. It's not relevant. The fact is, did you think at that time you were too big to fail?
Yeah, I think I probably did. When I had a sizable portfolio, I didn't I sort of kept my optimism that things would sort of come out right. So I didn't really look at failure as an option. I think that's the sort of psychology of most entrepreneurs. And I looked at every single angle and hoped that a clever solution would come up to help me come out of the problem. So somewhat did actually come up with quite a few good solutions, which helped to soften the blow of bankruptcy at the time. So,
Okay, talking about single-mindedness and the feeling that you're too big to fail, we have a question from Sejal Patel. And I think the question says or reads, so I'm trying to interpret it in the best possible manner. And that is, well, how do you find people who've got negative equity who are running away from their problems? I hope the question means that how is it that we've experienced for Lakhi Singh in his time in this particular environment, in this particular unique model of business that he operates, how is it that he's finding people who've got negative equity, they run away from their problems? What is it that tells you they're running away from their problems? I hope that's the question that Sajal's asking. By the way, Bob Singh also says, very interesting, he says, well, actually, you have to be careful when you're dealing with creditors because you can't really decide to play one off against you. Then you could end up paying. I assume he means that, you don't really want to start putting all your savings or your monies into one's creditor thinking the other one's not going to, give you grief or hassle. And I agree with that. I think it's important then take professional advice as to how to handle it. And we had this gentleman on last time, Mr. Segal, who actually told all the audience that literally a lot of these companies will settle at maybe 30 pence to the pound. So it's ridiculous. So how they come in with this angle that you owe me this much, and when they're really quite happy to settle at 30 pence a pound is ridiculous, but it means you need to have some nerves of steel. So yes, Lakhi, the question that Sajul has asked, who is, again, saying what you said, that when you're single-minded and focused as a business person, you don't feel you're going to fail. And I remember Sajul saying that she was determined. So obviously another budding entrepreneur coming out of her shell, going to soon leave her 9 to 5. But yes, the question is, how did you find them? What is it you find about people? What is it that shows you they're putting their head in the sand or running away from their problems?
Typically what would happen is that I meet somebody with a negative equity problem, and I think just to be a bit more comprehensive about how we meet clients is that because we are involved in every aspect of property, from bridging to property sales to helping raise development money, even buy-to-let finance from time to time, we end up, we're also specialists in stopping repossession. We always end up getting clients with these sort of problems because sometimes the deals can't go through because the numbers don't stack. So that's the source of how we get people coming to us. And because the way we structured ourselves on the internet, if you were to type in stop repossession, negative equity, LPA receivers, my name actually comes up in number 1 or number 2 on Google. And then the top 15, nearly all the companies that I'm working with, they all come ranking up 2, 3, 4, or 5. So that's how these clients come to us, just in case there's a misinterpretation with what Say's asking. But the answer to that question. Second question is, how do we know that how to handle their psychology or that they've got these problems? It's quite simple. When they come for the first meeting, a lot of these people, they come in and they are expecting some sort of miracle. and they want a miracle to happen and the whole thing to go away. That's usually a sign of being a bit delusional. And they don't, they basically just want everything to happen exactly the way they want to happen, because they're so caught up in the crossfire of the problem. So it is looking at a rabbit with the headlight sort of literally going like that. Ah. So I noticed that straight away, usually within a couple of seconds. So there's a typical psychology around somebody in debt problems and negative equity or LPA receivers or repossession. So what we have is we are able to understand that psychology, which is pretty much they want a very quick solution, and not everybody is the same. So you have 4 or 5 different reactions. Some people just want to come in and literally want you to do everything and solve the problem. And then the other extreme is people come in, they know what they want, and if you can't get what they want, they don't really want to listen. They just want to go off and do their own thing, even if it's to their own detriment. So you get
can
both.
I hold on that? Can I hold a thought there? Lakhi, sorry, I don't want to butt in while you're talking. So are you saying really it's not about property, it's about people and their psychologies?
Yeah, I'd say 90% of it is around the psychology of the person. If they haven't got the ability to listen, they're too caught up in their emotions around what's happening, they're distressed, and then that's also leading to them not being able to listen again, burying their head in the sand. This is pretty much 90% of the conversation I have.
But have you ever had a client come to you, Lakhi Singh, who hasn't quite been in the problem, but is, as you said, they're fishing around for solutions? They've come to you, and then they've come back once they've actually found no solution and realized what you were saying to them was what they should have done the first time. Have you ever found that?
Well, that's probably, I'd say about 90% of clients do that. They tend to fish around, they start looking at all sorts of other solutions, which some of them are, let's just say, they're not a complete solution. There are solutions out there, but they're not complete solutions. One of the things I'm
For example, give me an solution. Yeah, give me an example. What's a solution that's not really a solution?
So some people, I've got a client that came with about 10 properties about a few weeks ago, and he was looking at lease options. But I looked at all his numbers and realized that if you took on lease options, interest rates have to go up a couple of percent. And whoever's actually going to take on that lease option, they're going to be ending up with mortgages that they can't afford because the numbers wouldn't stack.
Do they take the mortgage on? You're saying lease option. Why would they end up with a mortgage they can't afford? Isn't it the lease option, the responsibility remains with the mortgagee, or sorry, the mortgagor? So the person who's got the debt, all they're doing is giving the option to someone else to run and manage the property, collect the rentals, pay the mortgage. And if the interest rates were to go up, it wouldn't be them having to afford a mortgage that they can't afford. It would be the legal owner, the mortgagor, that have the keys handed back. Isn't that the way it works?
That's 100% correct. So what typically happens is I get involved in a lot of negotiations between somebody who's got a lease option taken from a owner of a property, who the lease option owner can't afford to keep the property anymore, and they need to give it back because sometimes the lease option owner's financial circumstances change and they eat into the cash flows of the lease option. So basically, lease options can be a massive problem, especially in a declining market. So if anybody's got lease options out there and they've taken them on and they're now worried that they haven't really thought about the implications of a downward spiraling market, we're actually happy to help and solve that problem for both the lease option owner and the actual owner of the property, which is the person, that title holder of the property.
So is a lease option a bit like seeing a banana in a video screen? You try to get hold of it, it's not really there, can't eat it, but it looks like a banana.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's a banana without legs.
Right. That's even better. Well done, Lakhi Singh, a banana without legs. Okay, that one's a bit of a difficult one to visualize because not many bananas have legs. But I understand the point you made. A banana.
That reminds me of an old Punjabi joke.
Yeah.
What do you call it? I think this one's for Bob Singh.
Yeah.
What do you call a banana that's been left all on its own on a table?
Akela.
Yeah, that's quite a well-known one. So Bob, hope you enjoy that. I know you like jokes.
Okay, for all those people who don't speak the vernacular or are aware of Punjabi language, the literal translation of banana is kela, and the metaphorical or the what do you call them? What do you call those words which have a similitude? I think the same meaning or a paradoxical meaning, and that is. Akela means being left alone as well. So akela and kela mixed in is a banana skin left on the table. Excellent, Lakhi Singh. You also have a sense of humor, which is good. Yeah, it's like having a banana without legs. That's really what a new way of describing an option deal. Basically, it's a banana without legs, and probably more to say it's a virtual banana because I think a lot of people like to take the pressure away of managing their financial problems. But remember, without actually selling the asset, which creates the negative equity, which creates the reason for the banks to be chasing you. So it's like a delayed position of what's going to happen. And I think like Ninda was saying, well, you have to be careful when you sell the property. But if the property is geared negatively, it doesn't really make a difference when you sell. Is it not better to sell now than wait for the interest rate to go up when that debt is going to become multiplied by 10? Isn't that the question that we should be asking?
I think for sure, yeah. I think property prices are definitely going downwards now, heading in a downward spiral. I think I just saw quite a strong message from Bob Singh and his group today about 695,000 people unemployed.
695,000. That's literally just 4,000 and some hundred short of 700,000. Big number. It's about 10%.
Right. I think that's one thing he said, and the other thing he wrote is that the lenders are now working the opposite way. They're not looking to see if they can lend you. They want to lend you money. They want to look to see how they can not lend you money. That's something that he wrote, which is quite interesting. And I think he's also saying that the loan to values are not also what you think they're going to be. They're also trying to reduce those as well. So everything is now in a state of flux when it comes to property investment.
So talking of flux, we have a Paul Collier who says, well, it depends on who's eating the banana. So I assume Paul has got long legs. So he will be in a position to catch up with the banana and eat it. So yeah, these interesting comments that have come from Bob Singh somewhat seem to suggest, even though the property market's in a bit of a flux because the banks have sort of like said, we're not lending anymore. Any of the mortgage offers that were in place, they'll be honored, but all the others that are in process are going to be pushed back. Technically, I think the banks have gone away. Am I thinking? I don't know. I may be wrong, Lakhi, and you're going to put me wiser, being the fixer that you are. I think the banks are going back and doing these stress tests, which is what Ninda was talking about. And they're trying to work out what's going to happen and what's the worst position going to be for all of them when the interest rates go up. So when they come back into the market, they're only going to be taking certain choice applications, certain specific type of business, knowing that they've been given a brief about where the market's heading. Isn't that what do you think is happening, Lakhi Singh? Is that why everything's in a flux?
Yeah, I think definitely so. I think everything has a reason behind it, and if you're rational and not thinking in hyper positivity and realizing the implications of the spillover of Brexit, the last 2-3 years of negotiation. I think to be honest with you, I think even if you ignore the pandemic altogether, let's say it hadn't happened, I would say that the pandemic is just a reason. I would say probably not a reason, it's just an excuse to actually drop all the bad news of the bad economy that the spillover of Brexit was going to bring anyway. So I would say that so anybody out there thinking hopefully COVID-19 goes away, everything will be resolved, it's not going to happen. So the crash is here, and I think it's here to stay. And been saying this in a very indirect way for the last 12, 15 years to people. Well, fairly direct, actually. But now I think we have to come out of the closet, so to speak, Vijay Sal, and up and talk about what's really going on. And if we don't, I think we'll be only doing an injustice to the people of the United Kingdom.
Excellent. Talking about being in a closet, we've got Carolyn Williams says hi to both of us. Obviously, after yesterday's episode of Lakhi Singh, the property fixer, where she was digging her claws into these two young men, she's now decided to hit upon me as well. But you should not have your way, Carolyn. And she's also saying, Lakhi, do the fixer moves, apparently, whatever they are, whatever you've been doing. Anyhow, continuing with the topic. Right, so we're having to come out of the closet. We're trying to give the message out to people. Tell me how you're going to overcome. I mean, you're saying you've had experiences. People put their head in the sand, they walk away, they don't want to hear what they want to hear. And you know it's all about profile. So it's about the profile of the person. Remember, ultimately, it's the person that takes decisions, not the properties. The properties are a mathematical item. Today they're worth 100 million. Tomorrow they're worth 50 million. You can't do anything about that. There's no way you're going to rewrite the property market and the values. We know that it's too big for an individual to cope with. So if it is about individual profiles, how have you overcome those profiles? Or what have you done to be able to make a person who is sort of single-minded, is trying to wish away the problem, doesn't want to hear the truth, or comes to you expecting you to perform miracles when they themselves have created a pile of crap, really? How do you handle that person? How do you make them realize this is your created problem and I'm not the fairy godmother? Have you actually been forced to wear a dress and carry a stick with a star on it? Have you been told to do that?
Okay. Okay, what's happening is that because of the volume of people we're coming through now, I think in the initial 5-10 years of doing this type of work, I would spend days on end trying to convince people and almost be too emotionally distraught about people's problems and them literally knowing what's going to happen for them for the corner. So it was quite an emotional journey for me personally, because you really want to try and help everybody. But the question is, how many people can you really help? So in fact, the solution lies within. So I've had to become more systematic and in some ways a lot more clinical, because if you talk to them and they're not willing to listen, I tend to be a bit more direct with my message now, because I want to try and help thousands of people with solving their problem. I don't want to be working on 4 or 5 people who've got big problems with big portfolios but aren't willing to listen. So what I'll do is I'll work with the people that are the most willing to listen and the most able to understand and comprehend what I'm talking about, because it makes my life a lot easier, makes their life easier, and I've actually literally solved a problem without having to bang heads with people. So what we're doing is we've moved away from trying to be too nicey, spending too much time with people that aren't willing to listen, and more time with people that literally say, okay, I understand, I agree, let's get on with this, because I think losing a day on it is going to be more time and trouble than it's worth, and it's going to get me into deeper problems. So
Okay.
that's one way of handling it.
Okay, just to cut you there, stop you there, Lakhi, while we continue with the conversation. Zubair Khushi says, hi, Lakhi, and interesting, giving a thumbs up, likes the topic and where it's going. So good. I think we're stimulating a lot of deep thinking in our group. Okay, continue, so Lakhi. So you want to work with people who are ready to listen, right? So I remember you mentioned when it comes to negative equity, there is actually a particular solution you have which requires, if I'm not wrong, people to enter into an IVA. Now, and you said the IVA is the only vehicle that's available that's within the system. Because remember, you are effectively having to play within the system. You can't pull out new solutions which are against the system. So obviously playing within the system, the IVA is the one which is most friendliest, and they enter into the IVA, and therefore you help them manage the write-off, literally the write-off all of the negative debt. So you're writing off the negative debt. Now you write it off. You're saying basically anybody with the negative equity portfolio or asset basically can walk away from that problem quid pro quo, as you call it, or free of debt, or you can call it full and final settlement in unsecured lending terms, or with a deed of, say, you use a very a technical word, a deed of settlement. Very interesting. Not many people understand what a deed of settlement is, but just to recap what you said the other day, a deed of settlement is where the bank accepts that they have settled this debt, whether it had 500,000, 2 million, 10 million worth of negative debt on the client. That debt has been settled and they have no right further after the settlement of that debt to chase the client, which effectively nullifies the law against fixed charge lending that allows the bank to chase an individual not only up to 6 years, which is the Statutory Limitations Act, but 12 years. So if you've got a debt that's coming from a mortgage, technically the bank can chase you up to 12 years. Big sword, Lakhi Singh, to be over your head. Now, can you tell me, when it came to your experiences of having to face those problems, how was it that you handled the psychology of all the debt around you?
Well, I'm actually like a classic case of really what happened. In fact, I did all the things that I said earlier that you shouldn't be doing. So I'm probably just as guilty of being in flight and fight mode, having my head stuck in the sand. And but what happened is, at one point in time, when I realized that this problem is not going to go away, it's a lot bigger than I am, and then I don't, and the amount of stress and grief I'll have would be too much for me to handle this problem. As soon as I had that realization, then I rang a couple of friends and said, look, I'm in trouble, situation where I could have a financial collapse. I've got a very large portfolio. get me somebody that can help me. So I think as soon as you put the word out that you're open to be helped, then the right people turn up. And within
Okay, that's interesting. Hold that thought there. Linda Singh question is relevant now because he's now going on to broader positions, saying, okay, that's an individual, and we realize lots of the people that come to us are individuals who own the assets in their personal name. And he says, well, what about for a company that's got, deadwood assets, or you would call them negatively geared assets? Well, if it's an individual asset, what would happen? And if the entire company itself that the assets are held in are negatively geared, so the question would be, what would you do if there was one asset in a company? So we're not talking about individuals, because now we're steering away from IVA possibly into a CVA, which is a corporate voluntary arrangement, where either one asset in that corporation or the entire stock is has the illness on it. What do you do then? Do you go into a CVA, Lakhi, or do you remain only focused on, are they only IVA focused solutions, or do they actually do you deliver CVA solutions that has the same effect?
I would say that we, with the sort of type of people that are part of our team, without overstating anything, I would probably say that any problem is not too big for Lakhi Singh, the property fixer. Well, that is an overstatement in some ways, but so the type of people that I'm working with, the type of my team, are in the top 10, not just in the UK, but internationally in terms of specialisms around any of these type of issues. So whether it's £3 billion, £100 billion corporation, or whether it's an individual with a company with a £50,000 asset sitting in it in a remote part of England, we have the skills and the ability to actually work at every level. So that's a level of confidence we have in terms of solving problems. So even a CVA with a problem similar to an IVA is something that has a solution, but the
Excellent.
solution
Okay.
come to the table.
So what you're saying is, in clear terms, Lakhi, again, a very important tip for everyone listening to Lakhi Singh, the property fixer. I think a lot of big golden eggs coming out of Lakhi Singh's thought process there. And one is that, yes, a CVA can be arranged, and it does have the same effect as an IVA. And that IVA, I think, is called the DP3 program, is it, or the DP3 solution? What does DP3 mean? Because I couldn't work it out that day. Did a lot of Googling about DP3, couldn't find out what the DP3 was. I ended up finding PP3, which is a totally different, it's like a drug, but separate conversation. Yes.
Okay, so DP3 is a comprehensive solution for any property portfolio problem. So literal acronym you could say is Detox Property Portfolio Program. So the 3 is multiple of the 3 words with a P. So property portfolio program.
Okay, that's a clever anagram. DP3. So detox is the D, property is the 1P, portfolio is the 2nd P, and program being the 3rd. The Detox Property Portfolio Program, DP3, like that. Very snazzy, Lakhi Singh. Has a subliminal effect to it as well. I think possibly makes the ladies go towards you in an attractive fashion, and also possibly allows you to do business at the same time. Now, Ninda's question is interesting, and I think, again, it hints to the fact that there is a genuine problem out there. And I think a lot of people so what you've got now, I mean, this is, I think you were saying the other day, Lakhi, was that what we have now is the first wave in the first recession, that's the 2007 recession, were last into property in the first out. So those people who really didn't understand money, hadn't seen credit cards before, For them, it was the first time they were actually experiencing the feeling of credit worthiness and being given no money down deals and cashbacks. Buy a property, get £20,000 back, and we'll stick a tenant in for you, which was a bit overwhelming. But the problem is, these people are the people, unfortunately, who didn't understand how to manage money. So they're the ones who fell out of the bottom of the property market in the first recession. I think you said the other day in one of your chats is that now we're coming to the second wave, and this second wave is going to be more savvy business individuals or people who are a bit more long in the tooth. So they did put their properties into companies and structures, but the bottom line is overgearing is overgearing. Is that right, Lakhi Singh?
Well, I would say that, yeah, it doesn't really matter how big or small you are now. I think the whole market is tightening at every level, and I don't think anybody is really safe. And I think caution, you have to pay caution to the wind type situation is really important. So anybody out there who's got a portfolio of anything from 1 or 2 properties going up to a couple of hundred, it could be 100 million portfolio, 500 million portfolio. We're getting clients at every level. So we've got the solutions in-house because we are working with the best law firms, the best solvency practices, the best accountants, the best surveyors, the best property sales structure or buyers and sellers. Well, buyers especially in terms of our position in terms of structuring solutions. So everything, the whole process has actually been streamlined to provide the perfect storm for anybody that's actually in a tight position. So we've been literally practicing these solutions in a pretty good market, fairly buoyant market for the last 10, 12 years. And people have been coming to us through the internet, primarily through referral, as the go-to sort of person to fix difficult problems.
Yeah.
So certain cases have gone to 50 brokers or 50 solvency practices, and they've literally come back to us, and we've ended up providing them the solution. So one of the reasons for this group, the Alternative Property Business Solutions community, is to offer this to a wider market now, not just behind the scenes from brokers or business-to-business organizations that have been introducing us or from the internet. But we want to make it, the reason we're on Facebook, because it's got, it's a mass market. So we want to appeal to everybody. Yeah.
Okay. Ninder Singh goes on regarding CVAs, and I think he's hinting to the fact a lot of the large retailers, high street retailers, are actually using CVA as a way of reducing outgoing, so reducing the rental and their council tax liabilities or the rates liabilities, etc., reduce their HR payout and etc. So he's actually reconfirming that IVA and the CVA is a clever way to be able to deal with your creditor. But remember, IVA and CVA without a deed of settlement is like having a banana without legs. Is that right, Lakhi?
Yeah, I think we're just going to be very careful with the terminology, because what we're doing is I wouldn't really be, to be honest, I wouldn't really mention to the audience at large that we're doing IVAs or CVAs. I would say to them that come and talk to us, and the type of solution that we put in place is going to be the only solution in the market to solve these sort of problems, because the type of IVA structure and the CVA structures that we have are unique structures. They're not, they're only exclusive to us. They're not exclusive to other parties.
I agree with the point you made, because I did a bit of research, and the deed of settlement is quite a unique document to have. Not everybody can get it, and it only happens in very high-level corporations. And for you to offer it to, mid or large property portfolios means you've got something which is unique there, which is, I mean, I always say it's quite amazing to understand how it could work and how somebody could get out of their negative debt problems. Having said that, Paul Collier, interesting, and I'd like to invite him in. Maybe next week we'll have the team give him an invite. He's actually gone through the matter of, I think, the stresses of maybe bankruptcy. He said that he's worn the T-shirt, so probably a guy who's worn the T-shirt and had the mug as well of bankruptcy or the things associated around that. It would be interesting to know what he's got to say. I think it would be interesting to have him on if he's willing to come on, and we'd invite him. I'll ask the team to send him an invite maybe next week to have a slot with us. So yeah, okay, we've moved on now, Lakhi. Topic being negative equity. Now, taking the quote of the week being ahead is getting started. Okay, so being ahead is getting started. We understand. This probably applies more to our new listeners, people who are trying to get into property. So let's look at the other side of the fence. We're looking at those people who have probably been in property for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, who are now having to manage or steer their ship to try and get out of the impending iceberg, let's say. What about those people who are about to get into the property world or business world? How does this position help them? Are you saying to them, be wary, or are you saying stay away from investment in property for now until the market's settled and actually properly crashes? Or are you saying, does it make a difference as long as you buy at the right value? The problem being in that, if properties have got a limited amount of equity in them, they can hardly be looking for good deals, especially if the debt of those properties is higher than the actual market. What happens then? What is it that happens when a property portfolio that's negatively geared can't be sold? A property that you've got, let's for example, and a newbie coming into property wanting to take advantage of a discount, etc., can't get that discount because the loan on that asset is far greater than the market value with a discount applied. What happens then?
Well, 9 times out of 10, they won't be able to buy that property, so they'll probably move on and try and find a vendor where it's not so messy. And the way I would suggest that would happen is that if they want to solve that problem for that client, they bring them to us and we get them out of the problem, because it's not something they're going to be able to purchase. So anybody out there that's actually dealing with a vendor who's in negative equity, they could spend a couple of years trying to get the problem solved without an end, no solution. So we get tons of people introducing those clients to us to try and solve the problem, and we normally find them a deal elsewhere. So it's as simple, it's black and white as that.
Okay, we've got a mix of lots of things there. So I think the overwhelming position that I'm getting from your conversation, Lakhi Singh, that really the market is in a flux. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot, capital A, L-O-T, a lot of uncertainty. With all of that uncertainty, what do you feel is the psychological manner in which somebody should try and overcome this fear they have, or their head in the sand situation? How can they manage it? Because I know you've had lots of experiences, and you said once in the past that sometimes it's not the actual individual, but it's probably their other half. So if it was a female client, it would be the husband who's holding them back. If it was a male client, it was the female holding her back. And there happens to be, especially where there's couples involved, it's quite rare to find both of them thinking the same thing, because one has aspiration and the other one has a stigma that they're trying to avoid. How do you get that type of client, both heads knocked together and listen to you? How does that happen? So he's not there. I think he's left. Okay. So what we're saying is that in general circumstances, the market is in a flux. We have psychology behind these assets. So even if you're a bit more savvy in how you've been managing your property affairs, you're going to find it quite difficult to find out that whatever you were doing, whatever clever formulas you had, whether you thought you'd been managing your property finances in a clever way, now, just by the mere switch of devaluation, so the market valuations on these assets having fallen, all those clever formulas that you may have thought you had, they go out the window, because ultimately it's all about the numbers, it's all about the equity, it's all about having money in those assets. It's not about the rental income. The rental income merely is it's a false attraction. So you've got 20 properties, you have a total negative debt there of about $500,000 from the 20, but you've got good income coming in, maybe excess of £20,000-30,000 a month. Even with all your payments going out, you've got 15 or 18 or 12 or whatever you've got cash coming into your coffers. It must be a very difficult position to let go of that, because it's money for old rope, as you'd say. So money being collected from the properties through the bank, through a standing order, through a direct debit, doesn't really require you to do anything, does it? As long as you're spending money on the assets and keeping them updated, keeping them in a state of good repair and maintenance, not breaching the covenants or the tenant or the mortgage terms in terms of upkeep. But if you're already in breach, technically, of your terms because you're in a overgeared loan to value, can you imagine losing that £15,000 cash flow a month? How would you cope? Have you built your lifestyle around that cash flow? Because a lot of clients we've come across have built their lifestyles around that cash flow. So the nice cars, the private school, the £1 million pad, all those things, the holidays. How do you let go of that? It's a big thing to let go of, because then you have the Joneses syndrome in keeping up with them. I remember a client who was a senior citizen, plus of 65, who had approximately 30 properties, I think, in Oxford. And this client, basically, on the look of it, seemed to be cash flowing around £20,000 per month. But once the numbers were done, they were literally plowing back about 90% of that 20,000 back into repairs, maintenance, upkeeping of the portfolio. So basically, they'd become a slave to 20 properties. I know there used to be a saying in the old days, you're a slave to your mortgage. But this was a gentleman who was a slave to about 20 mortgages. And really, he hadn't got a lifestyle. He was living in a small flat with his wife. They didn't really have holidays. They couldn't afford them. They were perpetually spending the money they made on upkeeping the assets. And this gentleman was too old to go into a new business, to reprogram himself. He only knew property. He'd only been a builder for all of his life. How does that individual get out of this problem? The only thing I see is the DP3 program. because it's the only program that addresses the debt, negotiates with the bank, gives you a clean bill of health, allows you in a short time to get back into work as a normal entity with all the stigma attached being taken away, because it's then just about you being able to manage your bills, manage your incoming and outgoings, which are going to be very nominal because you let go of the big problem that you've been tagged up to, 20 properties. Can you imagine? And the gentleman hadn't had a holiday in, I think, 3-4 years. So a lot of deep thinking there going on behind this issue. And I think to summarize, we've got Lakhi Singh back now. I think, are you back, Lakhi, to join us? Are you had music?
I think I forgot to put the volume on earlier when I was talking for a second, but I'm back. So anything else you wanted to talk about?
Like a banana with legs, Lakhi, without legs rather.
That's right.
Summary of reflection. How do you envisage people being able to throw away the psychology of their inhibitions, the ego associated with being a landlord and driving a big car and having more money than the average person, living in a nice big pad? How are you going to let go of all that? How are you going to let go of that cash flow you got coming in, managing your lifestyle, and then realizing that if you let go of the cash flow, you're basically back to basics? What's the uniqueness? How did you manage to throw away all of that? What was it you did? Continuing on from when you got the message out to people, how did you manage to throw away all the ego and all the stigma associated with realizing that you were sitting on a pile of crap?
Well, I think it's not an easy process. I think it begins from, first of all, realizing that if you don't solve the problem, eventually it's going to come back and bite you. And I think if you don't realize that and you realize it too late, then everything's going to go to pot anyway. So I think the first thing you're going to save is the bit that's going to help you to get through all of it is your health. So if you realize there's going to be a lot of stress and you're sitting on a high risk portfolio, so what you want to do is keep your sanity first of all. Without your sanity, you're not going to be effective in any relationship, because you're insane or depression or taking on too much stress. It's going to lead to illness, and you're not going to be able to think straight. So I'd say focus on your health.
Can I ask you a question? When you were going through all these stresses, were you still active in terms of your other activities? Were you still active? Were you still very healthy in terms of keeping it up, as I would say, or keeping up appearances?
Yeah, what I did was I just made sure that I kept myself going. So continued playing hockey or squash or things that were good to actually keep your positivity up and your mindset positive. So that's probably the first thing. I think I'd focus on your health. The second thing that's really critical is then your relationships. So if you are in a relationship, if you're both not on the same page and you're not communicating and you're not realizing the problem together, that you're not going to be able to sustain this lifestyle, and you're not coming down from that lifestyle because it's sort of, you're working on a level that you can't sustain, then the second level is really getting that communication going and bringing yourselves both back down to reality to almost save yourselves from the inevitable financial loss. So if you don't do that, then you're going to be misaligned, and that in itself is going to become another problem.
Okay. So being able to cut yourself out of the problem, it's the last few seconds. I'm going to have to say Goodbye, Lakhi Singh. Thank you very much for the property fixer in the last few seconds of the program. We're going to continue this discussion for the whole week. And I think, can we have a repeat of that tomorrow to get to understand how you cut yourself away from the illusion of the life that you create with the monies that you're having, even though the assets you own are negatively geared? Is it an escapism? Is it a head in the sand syndrome? Is it merely materialism? What is it that drives people into becoming insane and keeping a hold of things that don't have any value? Tomorrow we'll ask that question, and we'll have Lakhi Singh tomorrow. Lakhi Singh, the property fixer, thank you very much for your time. A lot of good comments in. Hopefully we'll be inviting some new people in as well next week. Take care, and thank you for listening.